Go.
There we go. Hello and welcome to the Sprint 18 ManageIQ report. I wanted to highlight what's been going on the last few weeks. So next slide, please. This sprint, there's a chock full of stuff that we want to talk about. This is the overview. It includes providers, Rails updates, REST API, some stuff in the UI, service dialogs, Openstack, Foreman integration, event switchboard, automation, provider work, IPv6, bug fixes, and work in fleecing and storage. Next slide. This sprint, we merged 128 pull requests, so that's a little above average. We typically, that's not a little, that's about 30% above average. We typically do about 100 pull requests merged a sprint, so this one was over. I think a lot of it is because coming into this sprint 18, we had, I don't remember the exact number, but I think around 70 or 60 or 70 pull requests active. And going into the next sprint, sprint 19, we have over 70 pull requests active. So I do expect this number to kind of remain high for this next sprint. And we will work on our team to kind of get the unmerged pull requests down to a more manageable level, like around 30 or 40. That's going to be one of my goals for this coming sprint. So out of the 128 pull requests merged, 46 were bugs, 24 enhancements, 26 technical debt, 21 refactoring, and 8 were tests. Next slide. Okay, and turning it over to Greg Blomquist to give us an update on providers.
All right. So I've got a couple of interesting things to talk about on the provider front. I'm really excited about what this sprint is bringing for provider integrations. First, I want to kind of show off a small feature for provider refresh status. So if you jump to the next slide.
Oops.
So close. Okay, there we are. So one of the problems with debugging provider refreshes is if it fails, it's really hard to tell if it failed. And if it did fail, it's usually hard to tell why it failed. So one of the things we added is down there in the status area of the provider summary page is just a little status to show what happened on the last refresh. If it had succeeded, it would have just said last refresh succeeded, and then the time, about, what does that say, 3 hours ago. And in this case, it shows it failed about 3 hours ago and gives some quick reference to the exception that happened. What this should allow is so people could take this exception and maybe search the logs and figure out, a deeper cause for why the refresh failed. But it really gives insight into when a refresh fails. Gives you an immediate alert to say, like, hey, the refresh failed, versus people just looking and waiting to see if VMs ever show up. So that's, it's a simple feature. I think it's pretty nice because it gives that level of insight. But what I'm really excited about is what's coming up next. If you jump to the next slide. So we've been working with the Openstack development team in charge of integrations to build support for Openstack infrastructure in ManageIQ. And I'm going to hand it off to Tsumin Chen to talk about what they've been doing there.
Hey, thanks, Greg. So Ladislav and I are actually part of the ROS management team, specifically the integration team. So we've been tasked with integrating this triple OpenStack architecture with other Red Hat products, in this case, CloudForms. And to that end, we've been working on the OpenStack infrastructure provider. And there's a couple of people beyond just us working on it. So the code that the demo that Ladislav is going to show demonstrates some pretty basic provider functionality, creating a OpenStack infrastructure provider and demonstrating that host collection works. But we feel like it's a pretty good first step in getting our understanding of how things work in cloud forms, and we expect to have more advanced features shortly. With that being said, Ladislav, take it away.
Yeah. Hello. Can you hear me? Okay. Let me just share the screen. Do you see my screen shared?
Yes, sure can.
Yes. Yeah, I will just show you video that was recorded yesterday on BlueJeans, so it will be BlueJeans streamed through BlueJeans. Okay, so let me start. So I will still show it from already edited infrastructure provider that has been running for some time, so it has like daily rollups of statistics. Okay, so far we collect only like basic inventory, like memory, CPUs, disks that are not visible there, and number of hosts. So you can see that it's in relationships. Only hosts are there now. We will add other stuff later in other sprints. So, or through the host link. So in the hosts, we don't have available the list of VMs or the operating system yet. The list of VMs will be available when we will be able to connect it to the deployed cloud. So you will have cloud in cloud providers, which will be connected to the infrastructure provider, and then we can show like how many VMs are on the compute node, on the compute host, and similar for the storage hosts. So we don't have that connection yet, and it's like connection of two providers, which is something new. So in the list of hosts, you can see just the basic stats, like power state, the number of devices, which is basically just the hardware collected, memory, and I think number of CPU cores. Oh, let's just see that. I can't jump quickly through the video because it's very slow to jump. So we collect more of that. I haven't figured out why it doesn't show disks and other things, but we will add it in next sprint. So, and we have some basic monitoring. We are not able to show everything yet. For example, for CPU utilizations, we have it only in percent, so we will need to collect the actual megahertz of the processors from the SNMP, then put it into CL meter, then we can show it here. So virtual machines, as I said, that will be later. We can collect memory utilization. We can collect disk I/O, although the unit is blocks here, so we need to change that. And we can collect network I/O in datagrams, so again, that unit. And we aren't able to collect virtual machines yet. So you can see the normal daily rollups with trend. And of course, we can switch to hourly rollups. Oh, this was like two days of data. Oh. Yeah. So we are able to collect statistics. It's basically as the OpenStack cloud provider. We also use Ceilometer for the data, so it wasn't that hard to edit. Okay, so that was basically all. I don't know if I need to show how you edit the provider. Basically now I will just delete the provider and hosts, and I will edit again. But I guess you know all of that, right? I showed that in for non-CFME publicum. So while I will be adding that, are there any questions you want to ask? Something you are interested in?
No, Ladislav, that looks great, actually.
Yeah, it's a great start to the integration. This is awesome.
What APIs is it actually hitting of what projects in Instack?
Right now, Ironic, so it's not merged yet because I don't have the Ironic patches in Fog merged yet. There are some discussions about naming. And Ceilometer for the stats, bit of Nova because we use the connection to Ceilometer through Nova. So basically, in Instack, the deployment is you use Ironic, but then you deploy Nova instance on it, but it will be like deployed bare metal, so it's not VM. So we need both Ironic and Nova to collect all the info. And that's basically all. We will add other stuff in next sprint, like we can get some information about networks from Neutron. And also we can get more stuff from Ceilometer because we are collecting more stuff from SNMP. So like list of interfaces, list of disks, and we can add more stuff to Ceilometer on the Instack site. I just added the basic metrics. So yeah, and that's yeah. So if you were watching the video, I just added the infrastructure, Openstack infrastructure provider. So that's all. Any other questions?
No.
That looks really good. So I think as Ladislav was pointing out, he's got a couple, or he has an outstanding pull request in to Fog to add Ironic support, which gives them the bare metal OpenStack API pieces. They are debating on names right now in Fog, so he's waiting on that. Once that gets done, that'll be merged, and it'll kind of be a domino effect to get his changes in ManageIQ merged. But yeah, as I said already, I'm super excited about this. The other thing I wanted to point out really quick is this is talking into some future work. So, there's nothing, no code for this yet, but next week we're having a small developer meetup to work on container management integration. I'm really excited to have all these integration efforts coming together, all these collaborations where we have teams that it's realizing that community effort. We're pulling in groups from all over to help out, to bring in functionality that we really need, and it's just fantastic. I'm really excited, if you couldn't tell. And I think that's it on the provider front.
Turn it over to Aaron for a Rails update.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, good. Yeah, so this sprint, mostly been working on updating our tests to work with Rails 4. So essentially like fixing tests on the Rails 4 branch and then taking that code and moving it back over to the master branch. So essentially what I've been doing is I don't want to have just a giant switch that we pull and say, here's a giant patch that updates our application to Rails 4. So it's more of a slower process, like update on Rails 4, take that patch, move it over to master, make sure that it works with Rails 3.2 so that when we do the switch, it'll essentially be just, okay, switch the Rails 4 gems. The main things I've been working on are moving Rails 2 finders over to Rails 4 finders. So when you do stuff like, model dot all and you pass in a hash, so any hash-based finders, those need to move over to relation-based finders. So you'd say like .where, etc. Other things I was doing was removing patches against our logger classes. So we were overriding the logger, and that didn't work with the updated logger, or the updated logger API was incompatible. So turns out we weren't actually removing that code. So Jason actually just deleted it all, so it's gone. Other things we were running into is associations. So a lot of our code assumes that associations are eagerly loaded. So if you said like, I don't know, model.association, the code would assume that actually pulled all the records from the database, when that's not true in Rails 4. In Rails 4, it'll lazily load them, so it won't load them until you actually iterate over them. So in some places, we have to add a 2A to eagerly load that association. And then finally, I actually got the app up and running with Rails 4, so I can use it. Of course, not all the tests pass, and sometimes some of the pages break, but you can actually access pages and click around and stuff. So that was pretty much everything I did. Any questions?
I think I just want to mention one thing, that in moving to Rails 4, we should all keep in mind that any new, for example, Aaron's moving to Rails 4 finders. If you're going to add new code that has finders in it, try to use Rails 4 finders instead of Rails 2 finders, because otherwise you're just going to have to change it anyway.
Yeah, that's a good point.
We got to keep Rails 4 in mind.
All the 4 finders should work on 3, so it's like just use what you would use on Rails 4. It should work on Rails 3 as well. So yeah, no more hash-based finders.
Cool. On to Alberto on the REST API.
Okay. So on this sprint, we have 4 VM action PRs that were merged, and these are the start, stop, suspend, and delete. Off to next slide, please. So the one thing that was changed as part of the review is we've made these actions asynchronous. So here we'll go take a look at the start action example, where we have a VM here, 320, that's currently off. So we're posting a start action on it. So the one thing you'll notice is part of the response would be not only obviously the href of the VM that was started, but also a task ID and related href. So that would allow you to query the state of the start. So let's go on to the next slide, please. So one thing we had to do is enable the tasks as a primary collection, so you can query these task hrefs. So here on the left side is, you can see the task is queued, so we're in the process of starting that puppy, and on the right side you'll see the state as finished. And off to the next slide, please. And querying again the VM, it got turned on, you can see from the power state. So off to the next slide, please. Okay, like the other REST API requests, you can also target multiples with a single request. So in this example, we're actually triggering a stop on a couple of VMs, and similarly, you'll get the results, the array of results there, similar to the single async. But here, for each one of them, you'll get all the information you need, what VM was targeted, and the related task href you can query. Okay, off to the next slide, please. Okay, so also in this sprint, I've been working on the resource tagging PRs. So we have a couple of PRs out there for VMs providers, hosts, data stores, resource pools, and clusters. They're work in progress because they depend on the virtual attribute support. PR 1425. What that one would allow you is to be able to query, with the attributes parameter, query virtual attributes as well as reflections, relational objects. So that kind of opens the door to, more power with the request, so you can query hardware attributes of VMs and all that fun stuff. But anyway, so that's almost done. It should be, dev should be done by next sprint. And again, the resource tagging depends on that one. And that's it from the REST API front. Any questions?
I guess not. Okay, this is Dan. I'll take over. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we got done, major things we got done in the UI area, along with a ton of bug fixes and still a lot of work on converting all of our views to HAML and getting all the I18N stuff in. But we did complete. It's just about to be merged, actually, replacing prototype with jQuery. As it says here, it's been a long road. It has been. We're going to merge this. We've done a lot of testing. If you see anything, mostly like screens not finishing, spinners not stopping, and things like that. If you see any of that stuff, let us know or open an issue, and we'll get it taken care of right away. But for the most part, it seems to be functioning pretty well. We've also done some work on adding the no VNC console, the HTML5 consoles for vSphere and Rev. Very close to being merged, but we want to do a little bit of refactoring cleanup on that. And hopefully we can maybe move on to OpenStack, or we might even get some Spice console into the project as well. And then we've added in the multi-character set language support for like Chinese languages and stuff, so you can have different, support the different language sets for one language. And we've got the first cut of the Cloud Stack support in, and I got some screens for that. So next slide. So this is the multi-character set support. You can see on the right where the pull downs have changed. You can see where for the Chinese we've got the simplified and the traditional. And just for kind of note there, on the left is the folder structure, where how those appear in the folder structure, right along with the other languages like Italian and English. You see the Chinese ones there with their character sets. So we put those two in as samples. They're not obviously converted yet, but that's how that'll be done. Next slide. So we've added in the Cloud Stacks support. So here's an Amazon provider, and you kind of see it on the bottom right. We currently don't have the images yet, so that little green guy is the placeholder image that we use in the project. So you can see stacks there. Next slide. So then you can drill in, or you can go to the Stacks tab, and you can see all the stacks that are available, scroll through them, and you can click on one. So next slide, and get the summary view. And that's a summary view of some of the relationships and things for the stack that we have discovered. And this is all going to obviously get new icon images, but also be embellished with a lot more features in the coming sprints. And that's it on the UI.
All right. In this sprint, we've continued to add more fields into the service dialogues that support the dynamic feature. So this is just a quick screenshot showing the text box and the dynamic field. What I wanted to show in here is just the options that are normally available when a field is not dynamic. And then if you jump to the next slide, I have just a real quick sample script of the fact that you can populate any of those values from the automate side of things. Now, this work is all built on top of a refactoring for the common code for interacting with automate in the back end for the dialogue. So these controls and obviously controls after this will be built on top of that. So that's all working, and we've been having some design discussions around making the dialogue fields more interactive, similar if you're familiar with the provisioning dialogues, how drop-downs can cause refreshes of other drop-downs. So we want to get that same type of control or functionality into the service dialogue. So we're kind of continuing, but I think we're close on having a design that we want to move forward with there. So next slide. All right, so OpenStack, really two fog gems fog PRs that we pushed up. The first one was in addition to PR that we had in the last sprint to support the block device during provisioning through automate scripts. This was an additional piece that we needed to get in, so that got merged. And then for the heat support, we wanted to spend a little bit of time getting orchestration working from within Fog. It was partially there, but not complete. There was an effort on the rack space side, so we were able to use the majority of that code and enhance it for AWS support as well. The community's been responsive, so we're still working through that. The hopes is if we get this started now, we might be able to get that support in for the release, as we get further along here. So we wanted to get that activity started now. As we switch back to, I'll talk a little bit later on the work on the cloud formation side. And then I just wanted to point out this one bug fix that we did have for provisioning. It was reported a number of different places all around the same time. So if people are running into it, provisioning, I think it probably mean to say here non-default tenants more than non-admin, but it was often reported as non-admin tenant they were hitting. And it was provisioning would still work, but the automate state machine would not be able to detect the VM after it requested it to be created. So simple one-line change, but a lot of people are running into that, so I just wanted to point that one out here. If other people hit it, there is a fix out there for that. All right, next slide. And so for the cloud formation side, we've been working with the UI team. You see some of the results of that for getting inventory displayed.
So just for clarity, the UI team, what they're calling CloudStack is the same thing as this cloud formation or orchestration stuff, right?
Yes.
Okay, and we probably should just get the terms all lined up between all of us.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So working with them on inventory as well as service provisioning for orchestration templates. We've added some helper methods for that stuff, as well as continuing to work and refine the prototype in the state machine that will be used for orchestration template deployments. And next slide.
Cool, that's me. So for the Foreman side of things, a lot of our code was based up until now upon the EMS management system. So we introduced the provider concept and the manager concept throughout the code to really allow the system to work with many types of providers and managers, not just the EMS, otherwise known as the external management systems. So that's like the VMwares, the Openstacks. And then in that process, we mostly have been focusing on the inventory collection. And so we did rework a lot of those methods. So not just for the Foreman integration, but also to kind of streamline it for the other existing integrations and also the newer integrations that are coming along. And we did learn that there's a different Foreman API to use. So we did switch across to that. We're just waiting upon one other PR merge to get the latest Foreman API. That's the external gem provided by Foreman. And on the tail end, we worked with the UI team, have a design for displaying inventory, and that will lead us into the next sprint for the provisioning side of things. Yep, that's all. On to the next one. I think back to Greg.
All right, so just a quick update on Event Switchboard. Since we have the subclassing of the event model in place, we were able to redefine the automate routing for those. So we got those changes in, and it's really been a lot of testing as well as a couple of cleaning up bugs that we're finding in there. And we had one particularly nasty issue around the Vim broker connection errors that we were tracking down. So basically a lot of testing around this I've mentioned before, it's kind of a core piece, so we just want to make sure it's as solid as possible. So some discussions actually recently with Keenan about maybe trying to break out some of the pieces that we can get merged in before we do the whole thing. I think maybe some of the refactoring in the models we might be able to get merged in a little bit sooner. So we're going to take a look at that. That's about it. So next slide. I think that's it. Yeah, can you talk a little?
So in some of the previous sprints, we have been working on adding Git support on a single server. And what that basically entails is UI support and making sure that all the specs that we have, they work as if they're working with active record models, but internally they work with Git. So all of that was actually checked in, and there was a pull request waiting for that. So now, in the last sprint, we tried using the Git for multiple servers, which we would have actually in a zone. So one of the servers would actually be marked as a master, and which would actually host the Git repository. And in order to do that, in a multi-server environment, we need Apache or some other form of server that would actually allow us to, synchronize the data between the two servers. One thing that we found was currently we use Apache 2.2. If we were to switch to Apache 2.4, one of the advantages we would have is using the bcrypt passwords that we store in Rails can actually be used by Apache to do the validation for the Git user trying to do the synchronization. So a lot of effort is actually put into researching how to actually use Apache 2.4. So as part of the software collection library in the RHEL 6 or CentOS 6, we do support Apache 2.4 with a separate directory of its own. And once we got that working, I think we were able to validate that we can use the bcrypt passwords that we store in Postgres for Rails to do the same sort of validation. Then we were able to get the IPA modules from the team on compiled for Apache 2.4. We tested that, and I think at this point we don't have all the work that's needed for Apache 2.4, but it's practically, we have a list of the things that we have to change. There's more testing that needs to be done. And on the rugged side, we were able to, do the git clone, git push, and we're trying to write specs for synchronizing models between two servers. Git actually would have to be installed on our servers now. There is a component called Git HTTP backend, which they call it as Smart HTTP, and that basically hooks into Apache through CGI scripts. So that's actually needed when we try to synchronize data between servers. So we were researching some of those areas, and I think maybe in the next sprint we'll be looking at integrating all of these pieces and seeing if we can do a multiple server environment. Next slide, please. I think if you have any questions. Jason?
Okay. Yep. So, excuse me, this last sprint, I was looking at the multiple endpoint stuff. This was an effort that was started by Brona, and I took over. I made some progress, but we backburned it because the scope of it got a lot bigger than we all expected. Just to give everyone an idea of what it is. Currently, an EMS only defines one IP hostname port combination with authentications. But in some cases, you need multiple IPs for different parts of a service. So things that would be enabled with multiple endpoints are, for example, on RevM, we have the RevM API, but then we also have the metrics database, which can live on a completely separate server. Also on OpenStack, you have API, and then you have the AMQP endpoint, which may also live on a different server. One that I forgot about on here, which was one of the driving factors, was SCVMM. Has two different servers, one for metrics and one for the inventory. So we got some of the work done. It's been backburnered to focus on some other things like the pluggable providers, but hopefully we can get back to it soon. Next slide, please. Kind kind of a small addition, I guess, but on Amazon EC2, they added a new instance type named C4. So to enable that for refresh and provisioning and all that other good stuff, I added that in, and I just wanted to highlight that. And that's it. Next slide.
So this past sprint on the IPv6 side was spent mostly researching for Openstack, both the FOG gem, which uses XCon as another gem in order to talk to Openstack. And I was looking to figure out how to get IPv6 URIs that are built correctly to funnel through and be used properly. And one pull request, 459, was a solution to a problem where it wasn't being unescaped with removing these square brackets when it was trying to make connections to the remote address, so it was failing. So with this, the OpenStack side should be testable. So the next part with IPv6 is looking at some of the modeling of the way we request a host name and IP address from the user, and how that is going to get changed with asking for IPv6 address, and the related changes for how we communicate on both sides. In the next sprint, we got to work on the OpenStack side with the fix for XCon. Also look at provisioning and discovery, and how we do that currently with IPv4 and how that's going to change with IPv6. Next slide, please. Finally, this was a pretty common error that several developers and some other people in the community ran into. Our nightly build appliances for the community builds required a manual step where you started the appliance and you had to break the database. And so it was kind of a strange error, but we had loosened our dependency on the rake gem, and then a few months later, a new version of rake broke some of the code that was expecting the old version's functionality, and so this was just a fix, and this will be available in the next sprint build. That's it. Next one.
Okay. Thanks, Jim. Rich?
Okay. An effort that was started a sprint or so ago, the OpenStack instance fleecing, essentially has been preempted by a number of high priority bug fixes that needed to take place. In addition to that, I'll skip to the bottom one. When going back to that work, the state of the code has changed to the degree where my development appliance no longer works. So to re-enable my development, I have to come up with a new development appliance. This time it'll be based on an upstream build and hopefully support OS X and Linux, because we have issues with having a common development and test environment between some of the developers in Fleecing, where we have some unique issues where, because we rely on many binary bindings, we have to run on the appliance instead of natively. And if we each are running in a different environment, we have different problems. It's hard for us to support each other. So, and then hopefully based on this, since it will be all based on upstream, this description and instructions will be available to the community so they can use that as well. In addition to that, we've continued to expand our tests in the Fleecing area. We're in the process of defining an image repository where we could have representative images for various types, so disk formats, file system types, LVM configurations, and we'll base new automated tests on those images, and those tests will be camcorder based. So once the tests are run, the cassettes will be checked in, and we'll be able to test in our Travis environment based on that. Those are both works in progress. That's it.
Cool. All right. And with that, we've come to the end of the sprint sprint report. Are there any questions or comments? I'd like to thank everybody who participated in bringing these 128 pull requests and the demos together. So great job, everybody, on moving the ManageIQ code base forward here. just wanted to see if there's any questions out there, either in the Boogien session or on the phone. Okay. Well, if there's no questions or comments, again, I want to say thank you to all the engineers who kind of made all this happen, and thank you to everyone on the call here for participating in the sprint demo. And the next one's coming up in 3 weeks on February 18th. That's it.